Yeah, thanks for joining us. My name is Joseph Rudy. I am the director and head coach of the eSports program at Coker College. I was also a president of the eSports Club at Penn State. Today we're going to be focusing a lot on the student org side of collegiate eSports. I know we had a panel on Thursday. We went pretty heavily on the varsity side. So we're going to do a kind of different side where it's the students kind of taking control. So if you want to kind of do introductions.
Hey everyone, my name's Nick Stefanacci, and so I got into esports probably around like 2009, and that's before I knew it was esports. I started hosting Super Smash Bros. Brawl tournaments in my parents' basement, and then when I moved out to Colorado for school at the University of Colorado Boulder, I joined the Super Smash Bros. Club, and at the time we had around maybe like 5 to 10, maybe 15 players. And by the time I graduated, we probably had around like 80 to 100 players every single week, and that's when I figured out that like video games were more than just, like I said, hosting tournaments in your parents' basement, and is this industry of esports. So right now I'm working for a company called New, and we partner up with, actually, so they just hired me to be like their esports like consultant, and they've done work in the past with major, I guess, properties of esports such as E-League and Fortnite. So yeah, that's who I am, and I'm excited to be here.
Hey everyone, my name is Sri Lori, and I am head coach and manager at University of Maryland, League of Legends team there. I'm also officer of the Student Body Association, so I'm still involved in the actual operations. Student Body kind of does the spectrum of games. We go from Overwatch to Team Fortress 2 to a little bit of everything. And most of the games at Maryland do have competitive teams as well, and so I'm a coach for some of those teams. But yeah, I got started when I was in college, actually, probably 8 years ago, back when MLG was still a thing, and people were playing Call of Duty and Halo and all that kind of stuff. And that just kind of progressed. I went to Maryland for grad school. 40,000 students at Maryland. Some of them got to play video games, right? And so I reached out to the existing student infrastructure at that time, and didn't really have competitive teams yet. And as we talked, I'm sure that the panel talked about in the previous panels, there's a lot of scholarship money, and there's a lot of funding that's come in the last 5 or 6 years, specifically 5 or 6 years when it comes to collegiate esports. And so there was a little bit of infrastructure in place, but we put everything together at Maryland, and we've got some pretty high-performing teams there now. So I'm excited to be here and look forward to any questions.
Hi, my name is Joel Oliver. I am currently the Overwatch manager and coach at Shenandoah University, where we have actually 3 varsity programs: Overwatch, League of Legends, and Rocket League. And just this year, we also announced for fall 2019, where you can, one of the first universities in the world where you can actually major in esports, where if you want a career in this field, not playing the games, but working in the field, running these types of programs, events, those kind of things, there's an area of study there in that. And our esports program just began this fall, so it's a new program, and it was spearheaded by Dr. Gariziak, a faculty member who also put together the esports curriculum. But the program would never have gotten off the ground. It was something he's been pushing for like 5 or 6 years, I believe, and it would have never gotten off the ground until the students bought in, participated, began to get involved, and that would like that when the president, the board, they saw that students were interested, that's when they bought in. I'm also a co-host of Press Start Radio Show, which is video game news topics, that kind of stuff, on Saturday mornings in the Winchester area. Yeah, that's about it for me.
And I'm Dylan Beal. Currently, I'm one of the hosts on the Project Esports podcast, which is like a weekly esports talk show. I do local esports events around DC with a couple different companies. But I got my start in collegiate esports. I ran Penn State esports, and I was really heavily involved in like the community outreach and the student engagement there. So that's kind of my specialty there.
So our panel is all about how getting started in the esports scene. What's like that first step? So we all had first steps in our adventures. So I'd love to go down the line and figure out what was that first step we took. For me, example, like I was part of back when the club was just a League of Legends team. We didn't even know of a term of eSports at the time, and we slowly learned that, hey, there's more games that are just like us. We have a lot of friends that played StarCraft, we started adding them in. We knew people who played Dota, so we started adding them in as well, so it just slowly grew from there. But my personal first start was I competed in a League of Legends tournament, and being there in front of the casters, a live crowd, that was my first hit of, hey, I really love what this esports thing is. And after that, I slowly helped out with tournaments. I started stepping up to the mic, being a caster with them, and it just slowly grew from there after that first step of jumping on. So I'd love to go down the line and see what your guys' first step was.
So, like I said, I went to the University of Colorado Boulder, out in Colorado, obviously, and when I joined the club, there was only, like I said again, 10 to 15 players, and it was the perfect timing because Smash 4 was right around the corner, and I think everyone was kind of sick of Brawl and wanting something new over Melee at the time. So once Smash 4 came out, we started seeing new members join the club, and Melee kept like growing in numbers, the Melee side. So I got like a little like envious of them or jealous of them. So I went to the president at the time and I was like, hey, do you mind if we host tournaments like you guys? Because I see you guys are getting numbers every single week, because they were hitting like 40 player tournaments almost every single week on our campus. So he's like, yeah, sure, do whatever you guys want. Like the space is yours. So I was like, oh, this is great. Let's start having tournaments instead of running these 8-player Smash free-for-all frenzy things. So I started doing that, and I started doing outreach on campus and chalking up sidewalks and having tables just to promote the club, because I wanted it to be like one of the biggest things on campus. So eventually we got to a point where like Red Bull contacted us and they're like, hey, can we work with you guys to run tournaments? We worked with like the Destiny or the eSports club on campus to run like a Destiny's tournament. I'm like, this is perfect. We can totally do this. So that's probably when I noticed like how big the industry is going to get when we ran our first tournament in the tournament series called Flatiron. Currently, it's run by Endgame TV, and they're one of like the largest Smash, I want to say, media or streaming providers for the tournament scene, for the Smash scene. So yeah, that's when I actually started to figure out that esports is something bigger than what I originally thought it was. And then from there, we ran Flatiron 1, which we had probably around like 180 players at a bar, which was fantastic. For like a one-day tournament, we were up probably from like 4 in the morning to like midnight running this thing. And then the year after that, we had Flatiron 2. And we partnered up with Red Bull again, and then our title sponsor was Weed Maps. And just being in Colorado, and we played in the tournament on 420 weekend, so it was kind of like the perfect event. And then from there, we had like around 250 players. We just ran Melee that time. And then I eventually graduated, and I was a president at the time too, so I looked down at the younger, I guess, students there to hand down my torch and to see where they were going from there. And they continued on the Flatiron series outside of the Smash Club, where we ran a tournament called Flatiron 3, and that had over, I think, 450 players with top names such as like Leffen, Hugs, S2J, Zane. Like there was some of the best players in the game that came out to Colorado just for this event. So yeah, that's how I actually got like my foot in the door, and I'm still trying to push Smash and esports all around me. So.
Yeah, so like I said before, I started back when I was in college, 10 years ago. The team was incredibly small at that point, but it wasn't until I got to Maryland and saw, very similar situation. It was some small pockets of people kind of doing these things together, no real organized structure. Unlike Shenandoah and some other universities that offer a very, structured program from the actual school itself. Maryland's not quite at that point yet, so it's really on the students to kind of, organize everything and put everything together. In terms of, I think we're probably a little bit behind in terms of the level of organization that some other places have. We focus a lot more on seasonal play, so we have a bunch of teams for each game, and kind of just focus on that. We'll have a few key signature events. Since we don't get funding from the university per se, we do have corporate sponsors. Capital One sponsored us for a few years. REI Systems currently now our main sponsor, so they give us money for traveling to LA to play at Riot Games for the Collegiate finals and that kind of stuff. So yeah, my initial foray into it was I was a business major, and So I got my MBA at Maryland, and during that time, my entire goal was kind of just network and bring external companies to see the value of it, and hopefully transition that into Maryland as a university, trying to value it as well. We've had multiple meetings with the president of Maryland and athletic directors, and you can kind of see the spark kind of rolling, and maybe given a few years, we might also have a scholarship program. So that's the goal.
My beginnings in esports was maybe 15 years ago when I was in college with the original Halo on the original Xbox. When LAN was amazing, like that was the only option, and we just ran cables between dorm rooms and had I don't even know if you would call them tournaments. I mean, it was just a bunch of people playing, and that's played too much, didn't go to class a lot, but played in a couple higher level competitive tournaments. Would travel and go to Nashville or wherever to play against some of the other top Halo players. But that was, there was no living in that. There wasn't really money. It was just fun. And then fast forward 15 years, and here we are with this fully fledged organized program. We don't have scholarship players, but we are recognized, sanctioned by the university. We are competing at the varsity level. But as I mentioned, this program wouldn't exist without that student involvement. And I know you mentioned when at Colorado Boulder, just chalking up the sidewalks or whatever. We've got a few people that repeated some of our panels here. You keep hearing us say word of mouth is how this happened, right? Dr. Gariziak was just telling the students in his classes, he was teaching business classes, hey, who wants to come to a video game club? Who's interested in doing esports? And just over and over and over, and that spread. I know we've got some high schoolers and stuff too. Whatever, if you can get just on the morning announcements or put flyers up, that word of mouth thing, that's what's going to do it. That's how it spread at Shenandoah. Once enough students were excited about it, then the faculty and the administration became excited about it as well.
And so I got my start in esports with the second most perfect game ever made, StarCraft 2. You might be asking what the best game is, and of course it's StarCraft Brood War. But yeah, so I started playing StarCraft 2, and it was one of those things, one of my buddies in high school just sent me a video of, I'm pretty sure it was Husky StarCraft. He was like, you need to watch this. This game is incredible. And so I watched it and immediately went out to GameStop and bought the game, and we played all the time, and we watched MLG tournaments, and it was great. And I was moving on from high school into college, and I needed to join a club. And of course, StarCraft was the biggest thing in my life at the time, so I knew I had to go find whoever was playing StarCraft. So I went to the involvement fair on the first day of school. I was just running around trying to find if there was any sort of video game club or esports club, and I saw the esports club, and I went up to them and I was like, hey, I love StarCraft. I really want to play with you guys. And they're like, cool, come by and hang out with us. And the meeting structure was broken down by games. So whenever I went in, it was only StarCraft. And I told this story the other day, but I walked in there and it was an unreal feeling. So before, it was me and one of my friends, and we would just play online. But I walked into a room of 40 people who just play StarCraft 2, and it just set me, I almost fainted, I think, at that point, because it's so amazing when you're so passionate about something and you're able to walk into a room and see a ton of other people just as passionate, especially with something like esports, of where a lot of people are playing online now, that whenever you see someone who actually enjoys the same thing in person, it's incredible. And so from there, I kind of fell in love with collegiate esports. And I made a lot of friends in the club, and towards the end of the year, the person running the StarCraft part of the club was leaving, and he was like, all right, well, who wants to step up? And I was like, I do, I want to step up. And I think that's kind of some of the most important things in collegiate esports is it's really hard to just put yourself out there. And so I think one of the biggest things to do is just going to a meeting, just going to the meeting, maybe just going out to an event, I think is a really big first step. And then from there, it's just stepping up. There's a ton of opportunities out there, so the important thing is just stepping up and kind of identifying those opportunities.
Yeah, and a lot of those opportunities might not be in what you think. Because we talked earlier, if you like photography, go ahead and take pictures at your tournaments or your local events. If you like organizing, go ahead and organize a tournament. If you want to try casting, we were always open if people just wanted to just hop on the mic and try it out for a game or two. And I feel like that's how we found a lot of our casters through the club. So it's a lot of things out there where even if it's just like, oh, I don't know the game, I don't want to run these, I don't want to run the, the events, or I don't want to be on the stage, but I kind of want to help out as well. There's a lot of behind the scene things that need help, and there's probably plenty that I'm not thinking on the top of my head right now of just work that needs to be done for the colleges.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of things out there, and if you don't know what you want to do, you can always go up to people and just, find whoever is running the event and just say, hey, how can I help? What can I do? What do you need done that's not being done right now? And people who run events know there's a billion things that are always going on, so they could always use an extra hand with something.
Yeah, so one thing I want to talk about as well is a student org's involvement with the college itself. So I know myself at Coker and Joel at Shenandoah, we kind of have it easy where the college is 100% on board.
Yeah.
So for the other three of you, what is it like talking to a school that might not be 100% on board, might be kind of blocking you as well? So I kind of want to see how you guys interacted with your schools where you don't have an official program.
So I would say don't go the way we went, because like when I took over as president, the Melee and Smash 4 side, I mean, people that know Smash Bros, they're two totally different games, and the crowds are pretty different. So when I took over, like I let Melee still do their own thing, and they had paid tournaments. It was only like $1 or $2 for these tournaments, but still for college students that could be like, I mean, enough money to buy pizza or something. So like, and then if we told the school we were doing this, they would shut down the club. So we weren't really like officially part of the school, even though I still went to meetings and stuff. I kind of lied and said, hey, yeah, we're not doing this. We're just being like straightforward. We're just running tournaments. There's no money involved, because technically, like under like the guidebook or the rule book, it was considered like gambling. So we weren't allowed to deal with money. But again, like since the community was so strong at that point, like I didn't want to separate them and say, hey guys, let's just end this. Let's just make it free for everyone, because that's what they were used to. So they did that. Smash 4 was free because Smash 4 is a lot more like casual, friendly game. And then on top of that too, we would go to like a local print shop and like print up jerseys and T-shirts and stuff. And most of the time, we wouldn't go to the school first and say, hey, can we use your logo? So like the jerseys that were led up to, I guess the one that I put together, we used the school logo, even though like technically we shouldn't be doing that without permission. So I don't recommend that, but we were such a small club compared to everything else that they really didn't notice us. And I would say like, make sure you go to the school first and see what they can do for you before you start doing anything on your own, because they can definitely help you out if, like in our case or so. Sorry.
No problem. Oh boy, I could probably talk about this for a while. So yeah, we're very much in that stage where when you're sitting in a meeting and you have the director of Maryland basketball and the director of Maryland, football, it's hard to kind of get any sort of, say when they're doing any sort of budgeting or anything like that. So yeah, it's definitely been an uphill battle, especially when the school has a bunch of different priorities there. And so, we had a 1-year plan, which transitioned to a 3-year plan, which is now currently at a 5-year plan for Maryland to, kind of get on board with it. But I think what's helping a lot is other schools that have a little bit more flexibility, they're a little bit more nimble than a, big, campus like Maryland. So you see a lot of Shenandoahs, UCIs, or a lot of schools in California now official, League of Legends programs specifically. We have a few in Chicago, Georgia, UT Dallas, and so I think once as some of these bigger names, start coming out, hopefully, that'll help all of us, kind of geared towards selling this as a program to the school. But other than that, I think having a good community outreach program, stuff that kind of the university look for is, student involvement, like at Shenandoah, student involvement, the corporate sponsors that we kind of pick, I try to sell it more as the university has a lot more favorable look on as if there's something with job prospects in there. And so, we have a lot of I don't know if it's similar for you guys, but nearly all of our, eSports people at the school are comp sci majors. As we have a lot of, and Capital One is a huge employer for Maryland. REI Systems is a huge employer for Maryland. And so partnering up with, those entities outside the university to kind of draw appeal to, hey, Capital One is hiring 1,000 Maryland grads every year. Their logo is on our jerseys. And so kind of building those relationships, both internally and externally, I think is kind of, will kind of pave way to, a more stable program within the school itself.
Yeah, so I guess looking at it from like a club perspective, Penn State was in a pretty hard spot and still is because Penn State's a really big school, it's a really big football school, things move really slowly, and the club there is a special interest club, so it has like everything kind of working against it, I would say. And for anyone else who is in kind of a similar situation, I would just say make do with what you have, because you can do a lot with basically nothing. So you were talking earlier about that you use like your school's logo on like the shirt. Yeah, a lot of schools won't allow logos on like any of the shirts that you want to make, or if you want to make jerseys for your teams and stuff. But you can always just go out there and make your own jerseys and like make your own logos. It's really easy to go to like Fiverr and find someone to make a logo. Like it might not be perfect, it might not be the school's logo, but you can get something that kind of resembles it. I know Penn State did this specifically for their CSGO team. They had a CSGO team and they really wanted something that looked Penn State but wasn't the Penn State logo. And so they just like went out there and they looked, and I think it was like someone on the team or someone knew someone else who could just do a logo, and it looks very similar. It looks very similar, but it kind of gets around the rules. So you can do a lot with what you think you don't have. The other thing is like you were saying earlier is just talk to the school, see what you can get, but always have a backup plan, because yeah, it is really hard to talk to administration sometimes, but you can get surprised by them sometimes, and it really sucks when they won't work with you. But you can always do something, because the community will always kind of be behind you. So like for instance, one of the biggest things that we came up across is that we were trying to get into the Big Ten League of Legends tournament. The first year was there.
Oh yeah.
Rudy and I were working on this like for basically 2 years before it started, and we had all the paperwork. We were like one of the first teams in. We're like, we're gonna do this, and we put it down on like one of the athletic directors, just like didn't even look at it, and like we couldn't get into this thing that was like arguably one of the biggest League of Legends collegiate tournaments at the time, and like in all like different like esports publications. It was like, yeah, why Penn State? Like, why aren't you in this? Like, and it really sucks, but you have to kind of just keep pushing forward. And that year you might not get something, but what we did from there is we just started talking to publications, being like, yeah, Penn State administration kind of screwed us over, and we talked to our advisor, and that stuff kind of builds up. And if the students are really upset, they'll go and keep talking about it, and eventually you can start making headway. And then the next year we ended up getting in, because the athletic director was like, oh yikes, I don't want all these students like sending me nasty emails saying like, why did you let League of Legends in, even though they didn't even know what League of Legends was at the time.
Yeah, I think there was like an article on ESPN that was even stating like Penn State wasn't in it, and why it was like going through like the reasons why. And I think that's when Penn State realized like, oh wait, maybe we should have taken that seriously, because now we're on ESPN in a negative light.
And yeah, so sometimes, especially if you're working with a big administration, things can kind of look grim sometimes, but you just kind of have to keep pushing forward, and it gets better every year.
Yeah. So this panel is fairly casual, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask at any point in it. We'll be answering them. But in the meantime, like, what was the first time that you guys thought, hey, this collegiate esports thing, this is getting pretty big. Like, this is actually getting serious. It's no longer just the grassroots where we all started in. It's like, what was that first moment where you're like, this is going to be something?
I would say you guys talk about it more, because like it's kind of hard for Smash to be on the collegiate side, since it's more like a single player game, unlike these team-based games. So it's more so like you look at like Overwatch or League of Legends, you rely on a team. So if one person drops, you can probably fill that spot. But like with Smash, it's like, oh, if one person drops and maybe a few more people drop, and then maybe it'll just go down from there. So I don't know where the collegiate side of Smash will be, especially since we got to work with Nintendo. So I would say it's kind of tricky there. But I mean, I feel like you guys got more knowledge on it, talking about League of Legends and whatnot.
Specifically from the League of Legends side, I think when Riot started offering pretty hefty scholarships to winning players was when that moment kind of sparked for me. The first year that we set up the team at Maryland, we were just kind of dipping our toes in, but we managed to get a top 4 finish at the Collegiate tournament. And I think each player won, I forget how much it was, like $12,000 in scholarship money each. And so it was at that point where it was like, okay, this is the thing now. We can organize something around this. And so it's Riot's way. Riot is the game developer for League of Legends. It's Riot's way of showing that they're invested in this and kind of want to push it on both a social level, a player level, and a monetary level. All 3 of which I think are incredibly important. Like we've been talking about, the Big Ten got involved, so I had to sign a bunch of like NCAA papers. I had no idea what I was reading, but it was like, all right, sign off on this. So that that Riot could use Maryland's logo and all of that in their streams and everything like that. But I think so between that and the fact that every year, if you make the collegiate finals, they fly you out to LA. They pay for everything. They, put you up in a swanky hotel. They give you access to the actual LCS arena, which is where the professionals play. Every week during the regular season. And so, most of the managers have been in touch with the collegiate side at Riot, and they really do want to transform it into something where it's similar to like basketball or football, where it's kind of a system where you feed talent. The idea that a lot of pros right now, they don't they might spend a few years in college, but a lot of pros go straight from straight from high school to professional level. If they have the talent. And so I think they're really trying to make something similar to a more traditional sport, where it is, hey, you go to college, play on a collegiate team, and the collegiate team feeds into the challenger teams, and then the challenger teams feed into the professional teams, like an actual, array there. Giving students and giving people the skills they kind of need to, forge a career after esports, if they so choose, or stay within it. So I think that first year that we competed and flew out and all that was kind of where it clicked for me, and it's like, all right.
So as like a member of a video game news radio show, and also friends with Dr. Griziak, who has built this curriculum and started this program, I've been saying that I believe this is legit for years, right? Because that's what I'm supposed to do in this position. But I don't know if I really bought into that. But over the last year, a couple things. One, with this program, being close to home, getting buy-in from the university, seeing money, seeing Harrisburg, which is really close by us, close to where we are, spend $2 million in their first year on their esports program, offering full scholarship rides to college for professional gamers, and then a real big one, I think, for me as a big sports fan, was the Overwatch League with location-based team franchises, which I see as a huge step. And you see that the finals being aired on ESPN, and now Rocket League on TBS, and so I think it says a ton, and so. I think I finally believe what I've been saying for several years, and have been hearing for several years. Over the past maybe 12 months, it's really hit it for me.
So I guess for what I got my confirmation for collegiate esports, at least being very real. I don't mean to open up any fresh wounds, but it was probably with Heroes of the Dorm. Rest in peace. But basically, Blizzard put on this huge Heroes of the Storm tournament for collegiate teams, and they were paying scholarships for your entire college career, which is incredible. And I was actually at a collegiate meetup at PAX East, and we were all at a bar at this meetup, and it was on TV on ESPN3, I think. ESPN2, and it was incredible. It was on TV, and it was college students playing an esport on ESPN. It was incredible, and I think for me that really solidified it as wow, this is a real thing. This is gonna happen for us.
Yeah, it's something similar for me. I think Heroes of the Dorm was the first time I saw it. I was yeah, this is getting legit. The BTN tournament coming up was another staple in for me that I was becoming big. It was once these game companies, it went past the game companies. It wasn't just Blizzard running it, was now ESPN on top of it. It wasn't just Riot running a tournament. It was the Big Ten network saying, okay, now we're gonna jump on it too. So I think once it went past the gaming scene, is once that's, okay, now we're starting to get in our foots in the door now. And like you said, it's been blowing up ever since. The Overwatch League being as big as it is great for the scene. Not a lot of roadblocks so far for the esports scene. I guess the one big thing is that hurts the esports scene is how titles come and go a lot. We're seeing it with Heroes of the Storm now. We're seeing it with some games that are just struggling to survive, such as the Gears of War and Halo scene, and mostly the console scene in general. There's not a lot of games that are surviving, so there's a lot of roadblocks I'm sure we had to hit as well going up. And for me and Dylan, I know roadblocks just with Penn State by itself. Getting around that was tough, but one thing we were able to do is work with specific colleges within Penn State. We made a really big tournament with the College of Communications, where we helped out some of their students getting, maybe it was like in journalism, or if they wanted to do casting, or even just doing interviews at the esports scene, because these players, these students didn't really know what esports was at the time, but they knew that there was opportunity in there for them. So what other roadblocks have you guys hit that you guys had to get past?
So speaking on like a larger side of esports, not the collegiate side, is with Smash Bros. One of the biggest roadblocks I want to say was in Evo 2013. There was a challenge or like a competition to see who can raise the most amount of money for charity within I think like 24 hours to see who got the last spot at Evo. And I think it was between like Smash Bros. And Skullgirls and maybe a few other games, but Smash Bros. Like killed it. And they got in, and then Nintendo, within I think like an hour or so, came out and said, hey, you can't play this game at this tournament, you can't stream it. And with that, there was a huge backlash, and people were like, wait, what are you talking about? I mean, this game is like hugely popular, why aren't you letting us play this game at this tournament? And within, again, another hour, there was so much backlash that Nintendo went back on their steps, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, no, we'll let you guys play this game in their tournament. So it's just trying to see like a company like Nintendo help the community more, because I mean Smash has always prided itself on being grassroots, which is great, but I mean like seeing esports become where it is today, like I want it to be so much more than just the grassroots community that it's been for like the past 15 years or so. So seeing like I really want Nintendo to be more like Blizzard or Riot and help put on these tournaments so we can have larger prize pools and have more players actually come out to just grow the community.
Yeah, I'd say title change is probably one of the biggest ones. It's the idea that if you're picking a game, you have to and are committed to the game, you have to do a lot of research into longevity of the game, the developer. As we were talking about, there are some developers that are incredibly more involved than other ones. We had a actually really good Heroes of the Storm team, which is obviously now, for those of you who don't know, Blizzard completely disbanded that wing of their division, and so we're taking time this season to kind of transition them towards to more similar games like League of Legends. But it's really tough on those guys. They were earning scholarships every year through tournament play, and now they have to completely transition their skill set to another game. So I think title change, developer attitude, I think those are probably the two big ones.
I guess on a more like personal thing, it's just like validation of your passions is probably a big roadblock I think a lot of us have faced. It's just the fact that like this is a lot more than just us playing video games. Like there's a lot of really interesting skill sets and a lot of things that we're building here, and we're building careers, and I think now we're getting to the stages of where it's a lot more accepted, and it's a lot easier with things like ESPN coming up, and a lot of these big channels putting esports on the forefront. I feel like it's getting a lot easier, but that's definitely something I think all of us have probably faced before, is someone kind of like going like, oh, you're just playing video games, or like you're just trying to like work on Donkey Kong, like I don't understand.
Wait, can I jump in real quick? So you also know that it's something much larger when you have like friends or family members that have never heard of video games sending you news articles about schools that are offering scholarships for these games.
Right. Yeah, it's something big. It's like even at our school, we sometimes get backlash from parents where it's like, so wait, they could get a scholarship for this? Like it's sometimes hard to wrap around their brain, and sometimes they even think stuff like, oh, they're just going to play video games all the time, they're not going to get an education, and it's a lot of pushing through to them like, no, they're going to get an education, are going to play a lot of video games, but they're going to do that anyway, so might as well get paid for it a little bit for it, right? But yeah, so one thing I want to talk to you guys, like the one good thing about being in college, being in esports, is that we do have quite a bit of time to kind of explore options, kind of work on other projects as well. I know like you were saying with your specific smashings as well, but like what else have you guys worked on while in school that kind of help you get the experience to help you guys out?
Towards what end?
Like mostly the esports scene. Like for example, like I've worked with like doing a lot of tournament organizing for a lot of online tournaments. Like I don't know if anybody's heard of Victorious Gaming. They kind of been out of the scene for 2 or 3 years now, but they used to do a lot of League of Legends tournaments back when Riot gave a lot of funding for it. So I would cast for them. I would help them organize it, and that would help me down the line with my endeavors. So I was wondering if like, is there anything else that you guys worked on the side that wasn't specifically your club that kind of helped you get where you are today?
So like I said before, we started the tournament series called Flatiron. And without that, the big thing that I got out of that was connections. And that's something that will help you get through this industry, I feel like, just knowing the right people and speaking to the right people at the right time. So I feel like that has gotten me to a good place where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I'd say for at least at Maryland, I think, one of the goals I had when I first started out and realized like, this could be a very long committed thing at Maryland, was the idea of like reaching out and finding corporate sponsors. And so, I kind of took it upon myself to, reach out to, at the MBA school, we had, tons of companies coming in every other week to kind of interview for whether it was accounting firms or whatever it ended up being. So there was a lot of, demand for hiring, and so kind of seeing that might be the way in for us. The idea that it costs I think it's $2.5 grand for an undergrad and $10 grand to hire an MBA for a company through recruitment, and so if they can instead give us that money, and I can pretty much give them labor. That was kind of the strategy that we ended up using. It's worked pretty successfully. We've had, I think, all of the presidents of our esports clubs have gone on to work for Capital One, so they're happy with that, and we get funding. So, but kind of like formalizing those relationships. Previously, they've been very, very informal handshake type things. So, kind of putting stuff on paper and what they expect from us and what we expect from them, and relaying that to the players. Like you have your game responsibilities, your student responsibilities, and then on top of that, you have this contractual responsibility, and kind of seeing the players and seeing how they balance all of that, has been actually incredibly rewarding for me personally. But I think it benefits all the parties involved. So definitely like the outreach, the making connections. I think that's been a big part.
I'm a little bit different situation because when I went to college, like there was no thought that esports was a thing, right? Like this never crossed my mind that this was a field at all. So there was nothing on the side. I just was pursuing a career and a family and all of that. And but it is about who you know. Like I am good friends with Dr. Gariziak. He knew this is an area that I've been interested in always, and he just invited me on board. And so you're at the right place to be talking to people. Talk to the panelists afterwards. That kind of stuff. If you're looking for whether it's a career, to grow your club, to improve at these games, to run events, whatever that kind of place is, like you're at the right, you're doing the right first step here is being here, and then now put yourself out there, meet the people sitting next to you, around you, that kind of stuff. Because I was just fortunate to be in the right place at the right time and knew the right person.
So I guess during college, I didn't really have any of those experiences because mostly I just sold my soul to the club, and I only did stuff with the esports club during the time. But doing side projects is always really good. I definitely found that out after I graduated. So one thing now is I run an esports talk show, and I think it's really good because if you have these passion projects, one, it gets your mind off of your main thing, and it really does take a lot out of you if you dump everything into your main thing. So for me, it was the club. I dumped everything into that, and by the end of college, I was completely burned out, and it was really bad. So it is good to pick up things that aren't related or aren't necessarily related. I know some people they do soft general interest clubs. Sometimes if you have a tea club, go to a tea club. You might not think that it's directly related, but it is really good for mental health to do those other things too.
We actually had quite a bit of people in the esports club in the T club. Surprisingly,
There was a huge crossover.
yeah, I didn't even think of that until now though. But yeah, we're a little past the halfway mark, so I kind of want to like go back to the audience, see if anybody has any questions that we kind of didn't hit yet. If we wanted to go or anything, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I run local friendlies and tournaments around my area, and one of the most frustrating things that I run into is that it seems like there's a want for a local community for like the FGC, but nobody actually wants to like put the effort into spreading the word around or showing up to the events. What would be the best way to drum up support? Because I mean, I'm just one person. Actually, Nick is one of my friends who comes to tournaments and he tries to help me out too. But like, what would be the best way to drum up people actually coming out and supporting the scene that they want?
Yeah, because like you said, it seems like the one is there, and that to me seems like to always be the hardest part is finding that one. So it feels like the first hurdle is already done. It's just now finding the people that do want to help out and want to take that extra step forward. So it does take that first person to be like, okay, I'll help run these, set up Discord or Facebook group, whatever is the best way to get in contact with these people. And then from there, just be like, hey, I'm running this tournament. I need a tournament organizer. I need someone to help registration or something like that. And you'll get people who are very quickly who want to help out right away. It just takes that first person to start organizing everybody.
So I would say, just like from the perspective of me trying to get people out to like my club and stuff, is annoy people, message them directly on Facebook. Like, I'm serious, like just message them directly on Facebook or DM them, be like, hey, do this thing for me, like come out to this event. Or like if it's just like someone just playing, you're like, hey, you're coming out this week, right, to play. That, and give them free stuff. People really like free stuff. So like if you have an opportunity to, you know, get pizza or whatever, people will just come out just for like the food at least.
Okay, that's fair enough, yeah.
Pizza is one of the cheapest advertisements you can get.
Yeah, usually what we would do is we'd do the whole, hey, you bring a setup, you get free entry. So like that was a kind of thing, like you come out for free and play. But I mean, I guess that would also help too. Food's cool.
So from my perspective, you know, we've had a lot of like for the Maryland at least, we've had like a lot of local people reach out to us in terms of forming like an informal relationship. You know, there's the game gym down in where is it? I think it's in Rockville, and so it's like a specific center for, you know, younger kids, but like proper hands-on coaching for, you know, these kinds of things. And so we make soft relationships with those. But there seems to be, like I said, the want is there, but also I think that there's a lot of supply. I get messages probably every other week from, you know, one organizer or another organizer, completely unrelated, but serving the same need in the same market. And so I think the market itself needs to kind of coalesce and like bring all the other pieces together to begin with. You know, I've been to events that have, you know, 20 people at one event and then 40 people at another event, same event, just different times, different places. And so, you know, if the DMV is doing a pretty decent job at that with, you know, the capital's getting invested into esports as well, and so they have a much larger base and something kind of like a large figure to kind of build around. And so I think, you know, probably all across the states, a little bit of, you know, coalescing needs to happen, and a little more structured organizing rather than, you know, one individual here, one individual here. You know, it's obviously geography will play a role in that, but, you know, take for example the DMV region, like that can be like one entity could be doing that on its own rather than 12 different entities.
Just sort of add on that. I mean, I don't know, it depends on what community you're in, but there's probably somebody else out there probably trying to do the same thing, or at least very similar, and see if you can find them, and, you know, y'all can combine forces. Maybe there's like a local video game store, maybe not necessarily a GameStop as much, but I mean, if the owner's local, that might even be helpful as well. But, you know, in our Winchester area, there was just a local store that organized this kind of stuff, and that was a sort of big role in gaining interest in our community, was partnering with what they were already doing.
Yeah, a lot of, I can tell, comic shops are definitely interesting. The local one was like, hey, there was someone nearby who wanted to run Smash tournaments. They're like, oh yeah, just step in our shop. It was an easy thing for them because it's great for them. It's publicity for their shop, and then it's great for the community because it's like, well, we have a free venue now. So it's just like working with people who are in your local community that wants to help out, and yeah, comic shops are a great place to start off at. Anybody else? Yeah.
I know you guys are probably busy with like the day-to-day operations and stuff, but like, what are some of kind of like the big next steps that you're trying to do to push the collegiate scene forward? Like, where's like next year going to be?
I think one thing I want to see for the next step in the collegiate scene is you're seeing a lot of D2 schools who are now getting these programs. I think there's almost either just below or just above 100 varsity schools, either D2, D3, who are getting programs in here. I think the next big leap for the collegiate scene is getting these D1 schools. We have Utah, which is the first school in the Power 5 who was able to create one of these varsity programs, but we need more than just one. We need more schools to start coming involved in it. And I'm surprised that a BTN school hasn't done it yet, especially with the BTN conference with Riot. You would think that, hey, this is legitimate, they're already on board, might as well try to get as much publicity as possible from it. But I think it takes just one school from the Big Ten to jump aboard, and I think the rest will soon follow. My money is definitely not on Penn State being that first one. But like Maryland, Ohio State, they seem pretty close jumping aboard on that.
Yeah, and so I think like just building off that'll be the next big step. Once I think like UC Irvine getting a program, UT Dallas getting a program, that actually was a big deal for Collegiate, and I think I've like started the dominoes falling effectively. But once a few Big Ten schools come in, I think it'll become more of a national thing after that. So hopefully in the next few years. I'm also not crossing on Maryland too much about that, but up until we have to beat lacrosse viewership before they start caring about us that much. But
I was going to say that, but also having the state's high schools recognize these programs as legitimate as well, which I believe there are a couple that have.
There are a few states
I think
now
Georgia and California, maybe a couple others have recognized that. And so as these states make these statements, and then the high schools start having these programs. If the big schools don't have it yet, they're going to, because there are programs feeding to all their competitors. So, anything else?
Yeah, I guess the game companies as well starting to have collegiate-only tournaments. We see it a lot with Riot. We've seen it with Blizzard for the past few years.
Right.
This past year, High Res has kind of stepped in the game as well. But we get more game developer support. That's also something that's going to be big for the collegiate scene. It seems that they're all focused on their individual professional esports, which that is the first step for them. But seeing that trickle down into the collegiate esports scene is going to be a great step for us.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, what about you guys on the panel? Is there anything that you might want to ask your other panelists while we're up here? Kind of putting you guys on the spot at this point. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I kind of posed this at one of the other panels regarding esports, and it sounds to me this is more of a just whatever your best guess is. It sounds like the overall sentiment is not really pushing for legitimacy through the NCAA and just staying club team and being able to have capacities like me being able to stream and playing a game or gamecast. And what are you guys' thoughts on the dynamic and the relationship between the NCAA and club? You don't have to specifically go into terms, and so we all know that the NCAA is what it is. They're their own governing body, whatever. But I'm just curious what you guys think. Is it really worth in the end pursuing that? Is it worth seeking the legitimacy of it?
Yeah, that's something we haven't really talked about yet up here is what happens at the NCAA wants to get into esports. And I know we talked about it on the panel on Saturday quite a bit, was that one of the big things of if NCAA gets on board with it is that not plagiarism, but
Likeness.
amateurism and likeness is going to be a big thing about it. So in the esports scene, there's a lot of people who do Twitch on the side who are trying to be streamers, or they try to find other opportunities out there. Maybe it's being a caster, being a coach for a team, being even an analyst for a team in the amateur scene or semi-pro scene. But if NCAA joins it, you have to choose, are you going to be a college player or are you going to be trying these things on the side? And I feel like it's going to really limit the collegiate scene, because I know for a fact like all my players on my team, a lot of them have side deals. They are working as coaches for semi-pro teams, or they're doing Twitch on the side as well, and I don't know if they would want to give that stuff up just to play as a collegiate player.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that the NCAA is going to get involved at some point. Esports is projected $1 billion for 2020 or something like that. There's
1.5 now.
Yeah, so like there's no way there's a certain monetary value in which the NCAA is like we're going to get involved.
Okay, so my follow-up then has to be, is there anything that the esports can hold their ground? I agree with you. I do think it's going to happen. But there's so many restrictions that go with that. And I don't know if esports is powerful enough to say, nah, we're not adhering to certain things, because in the end, if you lose certain streaming sites and if you lose some of those side deals, I think you're going to lose a lot of even more interest immediately.
Yeah. What is powerful enough is those dollars that these players are earning otherwise, right? And so I think that gives them, so like a couple things, I see sort of a couple things happening. One, the NCAA says, if they decide to get on board with it, they say, all right, we recognize esports is different. This is not athletics like the rest of athletics is. And so esports, and there is some sort of allowance there for these gamers to continue to make money off their likeness, their Twitch streams, whatever the case may be. Right. And also, I mean, a lot of like the highest level collegiate sports, collegiate e-gamers are former pros, right? Yeah. Like LeBron James is not allowed to go back and play at the University of Maryland basketball, right? So that's one thing. If that happens, then the football players especially, but all of the other athletes are going to say, wait, you've been saying for years that I can't, make a clothing line with my name or number. I can't have a YouTube channel of me throwing a football. And so there's going to be a ton of backlash. So then the NCAA is going to have to give towards the other side. Or the other one is like the NCAA is just going to have to come out at the very beginning and just say, we're going to start allowing sort of a blanket statement. That's if they come on board with it, and then the other side is if they say, you know what, this is athletics like everything else, then all these then collegiate esports is going to be at a much lower level. The best players, they don't have to be the best players, the most entertaining players, right. The ones that bring in the dollars for the industry, they're not going to be a part of the NCAA.
Never convince them otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
Unless the NCAA pays them.
You'll definitely see the college team at a much lower level, probably of where it's at. If NCAA got involved right now, the skill level in the collegiate team will probably drop almost immediately. And that's something where hopefully the NCAA is keeping that in mind when they're thinking about getting in it. I think they're going to be fairly hesitant for maybe the next 1-2 years until they kind of realize what the esports scene is. They still seem fairly new in it. Because I know at one of the NCAA conferences coming up, my athletic director is actually going to be on one of the panels talking about collegiate esports, and she loves the scene, she loves all that, she doesn't know it very well at all. She will 100% say like, oh, I know nothing about it. She's just on there talking about what it's like at a D2 school. Right. So when someone like a panelist doesn't know the scene, I'm pretty sure that a lot of the rest of the NCAA doesn't understand it either. And one thing that I was keeping in mind when we were talking about this is that we were talking about how big connections are for us getting into the professional world after college. It's the same for players. Mm-hmm. And that's something where you can't have it in the NCAA. Like, there's a lot of teams that will be like, hey, we're going to sponsor your stream, we're going to watch it. Now they have to hope, well, hopefully they're just watching the collegiate scene because I can't play in a semi-pro tournament. I can't. Mm-hmm. There's even something probably about going to, like, when Riot did their scouting grounds. That might even be an NCAA regulation that would stop that somehow. So, like, because they would actually get sponsorship to be flown out to Riot games, right. And that couldn't happen if the NCAA has it. So just for them getting scouted will get restricted if the NCAA decides to join in.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, the NCAA has their meeting this week, and supposedly at the end of this week they're going to make a statement on esports. Right. It's probably a statement that says we have no statement. We have no statement.
More to follow.
Yeah, but
stand by.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, in the back.
Where are the collegiate streams / how do those get set up? Because I don't usually see a lot of them. University of Utah organizes some, BTN organizes some, but usually I don't see a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so a lot of schools.
And how do they get set up, I guess?
Yeah, a lot of schools do have their own Twitch page. It is very hard to get your name out there in Twitch right now. It seems like you're just a drop in the ocean on Twitch, especially when you're just starting out. The best way to try to find a specific college stream is just go onto their Twitter page and just kind of try to follow them and try to see when they go live, see if they have a set schedule. Because I know for us, example, we streamed every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, because that's when we had games, and we streamed all of our games. So you should be able to find a schedule somewhat and start following a college you'd like. Now for certain organizations, that's when you have to kind of look at CSL or AVGL, which these guys are collegiate gaming organizations that do hold tournaments. And they should have a set schedule as well. Sometimes it's kind of hard to find, especially with CSL. They're not very consistent, but there's a lot of ways to look into that. I know when Riot had their collegiate scene, I think it was just on their main channel.
Their main channel, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of these game developers will have it on their main channel. I know TESPA has their own channel as well, so it's just one of the biggest things is finding the organizations and then just trying to follow them and trying to see what kind of schedule they have set.
Yeah, if anything, I would follow tournaments rather than individual universities. Maryland, for example, like we don't stream a whole lot, like competitively, our competitive teams, but we always, whatever tournament we're in, they're always streaming there, and we're always playing versus other universities as well. So from my experience, it's a little better to do that.
Yeah, if you want a really good case study to look at, I would look towards Rutgers University. Theirs is really, really good. So they don't necessarily stream very consistently, but they actually do outreach to Twitch, and they speak with Twitch, and they have like a sponsor relation with them, so that whenever they have their big like end of the year tournaments, it's always on the front page of Twitch. And so I would just look to them and kind of like see what they're doing, because they do a lot of really good things. And I think for the space that they're in, they're doing the right things.
Thanks so much for the panel, guys. I was curious. A lot of the struggles that comes from organizing an esports club in the first place comes from a lot of differing opinions on the end vision of the organization and little disagreements that may tear a small, organization apart. What do you think is the best way to deal with it, and what do you think is the best way to kind of help promote this ongoing movement to a bigger whole throughout the country of collegiate esports?
This is a question that's very similar to like what me and Beal, I think, kind of coined as the Penn State esports civil war that happened not too long ago, where the League of Legends side was kind of thinking about breaking off and making their own club. I think the best part is always just making sure that you guys are on the same team, just making sure that you guys are holding events together all the time. Because that's what we try to do as a club. We want to make sure that we were a full club, that it wasn't that we weren't 5 separate clubs in one. We wanted to have cross-promotion between StarCraft, League of Legends, and all of our other games. And I think having those multi-game events is the best way to do it. At least that's what's worked for us in the past. So that's what I would recommend.
Yeah, and so I guess from like a more like here's specific things you can do. Read on conflict management if you're like in a position of power. Learn how like groups interact and how to solve conflicts like that. And then from a organization perspective, have a vision and make sure that all the decisions lead up to that vision. If you're making big decisions with your organization and it's not leading up to that vision that you want, something's wrong, and you guys need to talk about that.
Yeah, especially on the collegiate level, like you might have a great president, but then he leaves, and so there, like turnover is a huge issue, and kind of building this up. So, I graduated Maryland a year and a half ago, but I'm still, so I don't hold a position at the university anymore, but I still am, pretty up to date. They have the club does a great job at making sure alumni, kind of leave that knowledge with the club rather than just they leave and take it with them. And so I think especially as we're building up, making sure you don't lose that, those sponsorships, those relationships that, former presidents built when they leave, like, they have the idea of like leaving some structure in place, I think is going to be really important as these clubs grow and, become more.
Yeah, retention is definitely a big part of it, especially like if everybody on your leadership roles are all seniors.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that you have some sort of say coming in from the freshmen, the juniors, the sophomores as well. So it's just the people at the top making decisions. Once they're gone, there's nothing left. I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has one.
So I come from a high school that's trying to set up like a club, and we're trying to make it like a big, thing. And we want to like build partnerships and stuff. But one thing that we have in the club is that we do have, building leadership positions and type of different roles there is, and we got like some people that are supposed to be like the blogger, or the streamer, or social media, and then we have people that are supposed to run different tournaments, create different games. And I guess it's like, what specific, because I don't think the teacher at least did any research behind it, and just kind of like, okay, I think this is what we need, but what specific type of roles, especially if you have like a bunch of people that are willing to make it happen, could you need to like be able to, who's in charge of what, instead of just one person who's like all over the place trying to get stuff done.
That's one thing we had at Penn State for a bit. It seemed like us at the top were trying to run everything, and that's when this was a few years ago when we decided, well, we're going to have specific leaders for every game. So we had a League of Legends leader, we had a StarCraft leader, and this was completely different from the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And I think having those individual game leaders did a lot of work at Penn State, and that's something that I would recommend. It doesn't have to be specifically like, oh, you're going to be the social media manager for League of Legends, social media for Overwatch, but just at least one person who is at the head for each game.
Yeah, I would say just try to identify the things that you need. Obviously, having like one or two people kind of overseeing and helping out everyone else is a good thing, but definitely splitting up and having different people focus on different games, like Rudy was saying, is really good. And don't be afraid to like bring on like ad hoc positions. That's something that we did a lot, is that sometimes things will just happen. Like you're like, oh, I need a photographer. I mean, someone who takes photos, so you just go out to that person and go, hey, can you just take photos for us? Like, don't be afraid to just fill those roles as needed sometimes.
All right, well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks for everybody for being on the panel today.